Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords. And I wasn't sure about doing a video about this or not because the information in it is, to me, almost self-evident. But it is interesting because it kind of gives some definite proof about how wrong the SJWs are and how small the opinion factor of their point of view is. And also about how they manipulate things. You know, like one of the fundamental elements of SJW philosophy that comes out of postmodernism is this idea that there is no objective truth. There's only narrative. And so if you can frame the narrative by semantic definition, that is to say, if you get to decide what certain words mean, and you get to control what questions are allowed to be asked, then you can control the outcomes. And that's power. According to Michel Foucault, that's the source of all power. And so in the point of view of a postmodernist, there's no such thing as truth. There's only semantic power. And being in control of that semantic framework lets you take power from other people for the purposes of usually revolution, I guess, of trying to overthrow everything that is established and replace it with some imaginary utopia. So this is actually news that kind of shows that off. And what it is that apparently there's, in the Journal of Current Psychology, a study result was published by somebody named Christopher Ferguson. I don't know who that is. They're from Stetson University, which is in Florida. And the title of the study was, "Are Orcs Racist?" And so it was a study that was done with the hypothesis of, whether, to examine the hypothesis of whether people in general will think that orcs are racist and offensive, with the hypothesis of whether people of color will find orcs to be, will be more likely to find orcs offensive, and with the secondary purpose of questioning whether players of Dungeons and Dragons are more ethnocentrist or less ethnocentrist than the norm, right? And so in this study, what they did is they I guess looked through the university referral for volunteers, which means that it is not necessarily unbiased, right? It is sort of random, but it's random based on volunteers. And the people volunteering don't know what the study is about, right? So it's not like, this was a study about are orcs racist. They don't tell them that, right? But it does mean that it's mostly people who go to a university that are going to be on that list. And as such, they're going to have certain implicit, usually liberal biases. So keep that in mind. And they did this study of people where, of this group that were for the study, 38.2% were non-white, that is to say, Latino, though, again, this question of Latinos are Schrodinger's whites, right? Like, whenever the left wants them to be white, they're white. When they don't want Latinos to be white, they're not white. And black and other, right? 17% of the people, because obviously one of the things that they were later asked is whether they had ever played Dungeons and Dragons. And out of the people who answered, 17% had previously played Dungeons and Dragons at least once. And so there was a series of questions. It was made in such a way that initially, to establish certain baselines, first you're asked general questions and you don't know the details of what it is that the study's really about. And then it comes over to, they provide a description of orcs, which I believe was a description from the 3E Monster Manual, but I'm not 100% sure of that. It was the description that talks about how orcs are vicious and brutal and evil. They're not necessarily irredeemably evil like certain other humanoids. If they are trained from an early age, they can develop empathy and some limited levels of empathy and understanding, but they will always have bloodlust in their hearts, that sort of thing. And so they gave them that description, and then they asked them a series of questions. And the point was basically to do two things. First, after giving them that description, they asked them questions like, would this be an exciting monster to fight in the game, do you think? Yes or no, right? Of course, I think it was like 72% said yes. And, are these monsters scary to you? And, again, like something like 56% said yes, or something like that, right? And then they said, do you find orcs as inherently evil to be offensive? Okay, so there's a fundamental issue, because this is what the Wizards of the Coast people are now claiming, is the idea that a humanoid monster being inherently evil is profoundly offensive, right? And the answer was 10.2% said yes. So 9 out of 10 normal people, and bear in mind, probably slightly liberal-leaning normal people, because the study was drawn from university students, or mostly university students, or some possibly staff or university recent graduates for the most part, right? So this group, only 10% found orcs as inherently evil to be offensive. Because of course, most normal people understand the point. The orc is a monster. It's not offensive for a monster out of a monster story to be evil. That's a normal thing in human society, and in every human society, and all through human history for at least, at the very least 15,000 years or so, so it's just ridiculous for somebody to suggest that this is somehow offensive. It's the product of a diseased mind that has lost all concept of myth or of moral allegory, right? The interesting thing was that after that, they presented this suggestion that orcs might be a metaphor for a human race, right? And then asked if the questioner was then basically suggesting that orcs were racist, and asked, are you offended by the racist nature of orcs? And all of a sudden, 34% said yes. So the thing was that instantly there were 20% of people who had not been offended at the thought of orcs being inherently evil, but who are afraid of being thought of as racist. So as soon as they suggest orcs might be racist, do you find yourself offended that they're racist? You had 20% of people, out of sheer terror, went and said, yeah, of course, I'm not racist. Of course, yeah, they're bad, sorry. Right? So this is rule by fear. This is what's going on. But interestingly, even in a group that is probably tending liberal, that was still only 34% of people. And I think that's very interesting, because it means that even in a university environment, there's a very serious loss of strength of what that sort of suggestion, what that sort of semantic warfare tactic can now do. Because I think once upon a time, that boost would have been much higher. It would have been way more impressive. So there you go. There's the difference, right? If they asked first, are you offended at orcs being presented as inherently evil? Only 10%. Then are you offended by the fact that some people, that orcs are racist, right? Do you find it offensive that orcs represent other races? And then they said, 34%, right? But interestingly enough, beyond that, there was only 19% that were in favor, that said, I would call for the orcs to be removed from the game. So even out of that 34%, there's a group of people that were cowardly enough or foolish enough, naive enough to fall for the semantic trick, right, of suddenly introducing the word racism in there and saying, if you don't agree, it means you're a racist, and then ask you, do you agree? And you go, yeah, I agree, they're racist, yeah. They fell for that, but then when somebody tried to take the next step of saying, so we should ban it, right, and then you suddenly had another, 15% of those people dial it back, right, and they ended up saying, no, okay, that's a step too far. We shouldn't ban it, right? So these are all some very, very interesting results. There's a couple of more interesting details to be noted here. In the introductory questions, some of the questions were asked to indicate, to try to analyze in the participant whether they had a tendency towards ethnocentricity or not, right? Like, so ethnocentricity means you favor your own people, right? Your own, what you perceive of as your own race, and have generally a dislike or a lesser like of interacting with people of other races, right? And what they found is that there was no element of difference. In fact, there was a very tiny, but within the statistical margin of error, reduction in ethnocentricity among gamers, right? So people who had said they played D&D were technically a tiny bit less ethnocentric than the average of this study. They weren't more. That destroys the concept of, you know, the woke OSR and the SJW D&D people saying, oh, gamers are racist gatekeepers. No, apparently not. At least not any more than the average in our society. And the average in our society is enormously low. We know this because there have been other studies that have been made that show, there's, almost every other society on Earth, apart from, Western civilization, Western European and North American civilization, is vastly, vastly more ethnocentric than we are. And there are portions of our population, and specifically the white populations of North America, have a negative ethnocentricity. They are almost eager to be interacting with people of other cultures rather than their own. Interestingly enough, in the questions that were asked regarding, are orcs inherently evil? Do you find that offensive? If orcs are inherently evil, do you find that offensive? And, orcs could be a racist parallel to some other culture. Do you find that racist, right? In both of those, there was no difference in answers that affected the tendency based on race. So people of color were not more offended than white people by the idea of orcs being racist. There was no tendency to think, oh no, that is us, right? Like, you'd think that there would be a big jump if the ridiculous proposition that the SJWs have that orcs are meant to be black people, you'd think that if that had any relation to truth that any normal person would see, that would deeply offend people, right? Because obviously nobody likes a racist caricature of your culture, right? And that makes sense. But the thing is, you look at that and you don't think it's a racist caricature. You think it's nothing to do with you, right? So you're like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's us, man. That's the result. There was and history of playing D&D didn't affect the answer either, right? So people who had played D&D were not more likely or less likely to be offended. But there was one factor that did change the equation. Women were much more likely to be offended than men in those answers, right? So the percentage of women that thought orcs being inherently evil is offensive, and that thought orcs are racist and therefore offensive, and thought that you should advocate to have orcs removed from the game, in all of those, women skewed higher than men. And so, this is, again, basically, this is an issue of Karens, right? These are white SJW Karens wanting to meddle in people's business, just like the church ladies of the 1980s, right? D&D, the anti-D&D movement in the Christian conservatism was run by women, right? It was run by these meddling, busybody church ladies that felt that they had the right to decide for everybody else what they should or shouldn't be allowed to do, right? These moral Puritans. And now we've got the exact same thing, except that instead of being, prim little Baptist women with their hairs in a bun. They're SJW feminists, you know, that have nose piercings and purple hair, right? But that's the only difference. They're still the same disgusting moral Puritans that want to take away the fun of everybody else because they feel in some way that they've been mistreated by society, you know. They don't want anyone else to get to have any entertainment that they themselves do not approve of. So that's basically the story of this. I think it's a very interesting study with some very interesting findings. But like I said, there's nothing here that wasn't what I already assumed was correct. You know, that was my supposition. It's nice to see somebody has done a study that basically confirms those suppositions. The problem is, of course, that the SJWs are never going to accept these as anything meaningful, right? But now we've got it. It's right there. Christopher Ferguson, current psychology, Stetson University. Are orcs racist? And it's a weapon that we can use to fight back against the bullshit and the lies that the wokists that want to destroy our hobby keep pushing. Another way to fight back is to not support companies or writers that hate you, that want to destroy your fun, that believe in what the church ladies or the SJW church ladies are pushing, and instead to support gamers who like you and like gaming and want you to have fun gaming. So instead of picking up stuff from, you know, Wizards or from other SJW publishers, consider checking out my books, stuff like The World of the Last Sun, which has some wild and crazy gonzo setting with a lot of weird fantasy, lots of incredible tables, lots of exciting places that you can use entirely or take out in parts and put them in your own setting or whatever. Lots of really fun material in there. Bestseller. Another bestseller now, The Old School Companion 2, which is 320 pages of medieval authentic adventures. Check out the Old School Companion 1 too, which is also a collection of about the same size that's full of medieval authentic resources like medieval magic, medieval aristocracy, rules on medieval cleric orders, stuff about elves, cursed items, monsters, a whole variety of stuff in there that you can use in any OSR game. The Invisible College, which has been getting some positive reviews recently on Twitter. It's a very big book, 423 pages, I think. It's a complete modern day occult conspiracy RPG. It's OSR and it's full of exciting stuff based on, real world history and real world occultism, I guess you could say. So check those out, or if none of those appeal to you, check out my other books, Lion and Dragon, Star Adventure, and the RPG Pundit Presents series. There's, I think, 106 issues. There should be 107 soon. I don't know when. It's being delayed a little bit. But you've got all kinds of different topics in there, and you just spend a few bucks. It's like you're buying me a coffee, and you're also getting something in return. Also, be sure to like this video and share this video anywhere you think people will find it useful or will get pissed off by it. Because let's say you don't have a penny to your name right now. You'd love to buy my books, but you can't, right? That's okay. But subscribe to my channel and share the video. And that's a big way to help too, because you get the word out and you also are kind of supporting the channel that way. So I appreciate everybody, by the way, who buys my books or who shares my videos, because that is always a big help. And it's only by working together and maintaining solidarity, the Polish kind, not the commie kind, that we can fight back against the kind of people that would like to destroy all of the heroic ideals and mythic foundations of role-playing. That's everything for today. Currently smoking Davidoff 400 series, plus Argento Latakia.